Welcome to Poleshift News and of course the Mavstar Observatory. Guys, a little bit later on in this video I want to go over some of the data that we've been collecting and just explain how we're going to use that data. But before we do, I would like to, as always, thank those people, and they are the few people that support this observatory. And if I can, just explain a few things, guys. Right, as you know, in most of the videos, one at the beginning and sometimes one at the end, I ask for a bit of support for the observatory. As you know, recently we've put 6 magnetometers out around this world. We've got 2 in the United States, 2 in Australia, 1 in Hong Kong, and 1 will be arriving, I believe, at some point this week. One of our magnetometers is coming back for a little bit of maintenance from the Gold Coast. As soon as it arrives, I'm hoping to have the problem solved with that and get it straight back out to the Gold Coast so that it can continue collecting data. But I wanted to talk about why we raised the money and why we ask that the public support it. I know I've mentioned it a few times, guys. The reason why we're publicly funded is because then we are not dictated to as to what we put out with regards to information. If we were sub-supported by a smaller organisation, probably a well-known organisation, and we shared our data as well as receive some of their data, obviously we would be told what data we could put out publicly and what data we could also share. That's if another organisation wanted to come in and support us financially. I will say that we have had a few companies over the time that we've been doing this offer support, and it's been refused. And the reason for that is because, like I was just saying, I don't want to be told, as I would expect eventually would happen by these organisations, what data I can put out to you guys. I wanted to keep it absolutely clean and publicly funded, and therefore, the only one I owe any allegiance to is you guys that fund it. Now we're getting on to 23,500 subscribers, guys, and we've got 160 patrons at the moment, and we have a handful of people that throughout the month support us. But we raise in comparison for what we do very little amounts of money, and it really does need a little bit more of a boost. We have raised less money this month, at the end of the last month, than what we did the previous month, yet we're doing more work. So if we can try and turn this situation around, we can start moving forward with the data that we collect and some of the other projects that we've got coming up. It can just speed them up as opposed to these things lingering out. There's a few changes I want to do as well. I want to at least do one live broadcast starting this month every week. We're going to have to come to an arrangement of what time we're going to do this, because we've got people in the United States at different times and people in Australia. That's where our main subscribers are. The UK, Ireland, the United States and Australia. There's our main subscribers, and then we have a scattering of subscribers over Europe. So we need to come and arrange a time where we can do these live podcasts where you guys can ask questions and I can answer them, and we can talk about some of the things that we do here on the Poleshift News and obviously the Mavstar Observatory. So let's get into what it is and why we're collecting the data. So I think it's time to start delivering evidence of what we've been talking about. Now, over the northern hemisphere, you can see almost like a configuration of an number 8, and you can see what is going on there. The abnormality with regards to what you're looking at has been common now for around about 15-20 years, and I believe it's a direct result, like I've said many times before, as an influx of cosmic radiation due to a low solar output, shrinkage of the heliosphere, and also a weakened magnetosphere. I reckon it has definitely considerable effects on our jet streams, and what you're looking at in terms of evidence is polar jet streams mixing with subtropical jet streams, as opposed to having nice wavy patterns around the polar region and the same around the subtropical region over the northern hemisphere. We've also got the same taking place over the southern hemisphere, and you can see subtropical regions delivering that warm moist air directly into the polar regions. Again, when we consider what's going on over the southern hemisphere, it has been for some reason now considerably worse, and definitely considerable amount of water building up over the southern hemisphere for some reason. Now I believe the reason for that is that's where our ozone hole is, and as you know, the aerosols that make up the ozone or create the ozone hole obviously must be absorbing that extra cosmic radiation. When they come together, they form a larger particle, and that sets up perfect situations for clouds to form and the water to precipitate on these larger particles. So we've got cosmic radiation attaching to aerosols, and then in turn water is able to condense on them when they get to a larger particle. This is something now which has been up until recently theoretical, but is now starting to be proven science. So when we look at the southern hemisphere where the ozone hole is, I think it stands to reason that the reason why we're seeing a lot more dramatic effect with regards to the jet streams is because we've got something in favour of building the jet streams up more wider than what they usually are. If we just compare the southern hemisphere, what we're looking at right now, we're looking directly over the Antarctic region, and then compare it with the Arctic region, you'll see a considerable difference. Now we don't have anywhere near the problem with the ozone hole over the northern hemisphere, and as you can see, the jet streams are nowhere near as severe as what they are over the southern hemisphere. And I think the reason for that is, although this is theoretical, but I think that this is starting to stack up as logic. The reason why we haven't is because we don't have so many aerosols over the northern hemisphere like we do over the southern hemisphere, and as a result, like I say, the cosmic radiation is building up down there and attaching to the aerosols, forming bigger particles, and therefore we're getting more water vapor, and the more water vapor we add to these jet streams obviously causes more severe problems. But what we do have in common both over the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere is jet streams mixing. So we're getting polar jet streams mixed with subtropical, and we're getting that the same over the southern hemisphere. I want to just show you where our jet streams should be, again to rebut more evidence, so it's fact, it's not just all theory. I want to just show you where our jet streams should be during normal times. So I've attached two diagrams together. I've put the polar jet stream and the subtropical jet stream, and also the equatorial region diagram at the bottom, and we've also got a still of null skull jet streams to prove the point again. As you can see, we should have a polar jet stream at 60 degrees north, and then a subtropical jet stream around 30 degrees north, and we'll have the same over the southern hemisphere. But if you look at the still and just go back to the live up-to-date data and images, you'll see that we do not have these jet streams at 60 degrees and 30 degrees north or south of the equator. We've got severe subtropical and polar jet streams mixing, and this really is the reason why South China Islands are receiving their cooler weather and Arctic blasts that have destroyed hundreds of thousands of heads of cattle, and again hundreds of thousands of hectares of staple foods as a result of instant freezing. It's the jet streams that are delivering it, and the reason why they're delivering it like this now is because, as you can see, in some cases on a daily basis we might have 1,000-mile wide jet stream, and we might even have up to 3,000-mile wide jet streams, and this is becoming increasingly the case. These jet streams are becoming more sluggish, and they fragment, they break, they intermingle with subtropical polar jet streams, and as a result we're getting precipitation and also these frosted Arctic climates in places that we don't usually, we're also getting a lot more flooding in these regions as well. It's a direct result of where the jet streams are at that point in time, and they are to some degree predictable short term, but no longer predictable long term, because these jet streams can change, as we know, and we've heard from first-hand accounts from pilots that they get given a weather report, and by the time they're in the air, after a couple of hours, the weather report is no longer matching the conditions of where they are flying. So we know that these things are rapidly changing. That's why it's becoming harder for climatologists to predict the weather, even despite all the weather modelling systems and the millions and millions of pounds that's been invested in creating these weather modelling systems. They're all failing because the weather is dramatically changing. I've experienced this in the UK, and I'm pretty sure you have in other parts of Europe, the United States, Australia, etc. I believe that this is now becoming a common problem globally. You have probably been like me, sitting outside enjoying a beautiful day. The cloud is almost none in the sky, beautiful blue sky, and yet an hour or two later you have to put a jumper on because the wind has gone bitter cold. And I've been pointing out to you guys for the last 7 years that we've been experiencing sundogs at this position of where we are on the globe, and we shouldn't be. This is a new phenomena that we're experiencing, and people fail to see it. A lot of people in the UK are not even noticing it, and when they do, they don't even investigate what it is they're actually seeing. We're talking about these sundogs, and the different clouds that we're now getting. They're called cirrus clouds. They look like long feathers in the sky, and these are commonly made up with ice crystals, and that's why we're getting these prismatic effects appear both sides of the sun, and sometimes on occasions above the sun as well. This is more common to Arctic climates. These things are more common and visible in the Arctic climates, not at 52 degrees north. So something definitely is changing with our planet, and the signs are all there, guys. What this spells for us is that this is going to continue, because there is no sign whatsoever at this point in time of equilibrium. We know that we've lost 20%, maybe 25% of the Earth's magnetosphere, and we also know that for the last 33 years there's been a dwindling of sunspot activity, and we also now can link sunspot activity with climate. And there should be no reason why that isn't the case. It's just that there has been some deviations in recent climatology, which has led us to look elsewhere for the reasons why we experience different climates. We should have just stayed with what we knew and what matched up very well with the data. We probably would have understood this many years ago, that when we start to get low solar outputs, then it stands to reason that we're going to get low temperatures develop after a prolonged period of time. What I mean by that is that you've got to imagine is that the Earth is a huge thing, 24,000 miles in diameter, and therefore a great inertia. It takes time for the climate to change on our planet. Usually, you could be looking at 800 years before 1 degree shift, and we've seen this happen in the last 30 years. We've seen more than 1 degree in temperature shift, and that's unusual. That shows us that we're no longer playing the same game as what we used to. Things are rapidly changing on our planet, and as a result they are going to definitely start to affect us. Guys, there have been people already in the last 30 years, many thousands, that have lost their lives as a direct result of the low solar output and the magnetosphere weakening, but it's just not been linked to their deaths, but it is. When farmers in India start looking for alternative methods, like changing the seeds to suit the climate, and the climate changes, and they predicted a more wetter climate or a more dry climate, and they chose the seeds that were genetically modified to thrive better in those conditions, and the conditions changed to the opposite. Well, then it's no wonder that those crops are going to be no longer forthcoming for that season. As a result, the farmers have loaned money for these expensive seeds off these genetically modified companies, and I'm not going to mention names, but they exist. And as a result, they can't make the loan repayments, and they lose their lands and farms that has been in their families for many generations, and they see it as a massive failure, and they take their own lives. And this is something that's not been covered by the mainstream organisation, and if it has, it's been covered very lightly. It's a serious case in these countries, and you can understand why they resort to such desperate measures. But the real seeds of this planet that have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years still outperform these genetically modified ones, for the fact that they can, and have learned to cope with dry seasons and wet seasons. They're called a good all-rounder, and it's no wonder why they've been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. Only humans recently would think that it would be a good idea to start modifying them, and look at the results. It's not just the health related problems that come up with these GMO crops. It's the fact that sometimes they are not suited for the increasingly changing climate that we're experiencing right now. If it was me and I was given any advice, I'd say stay to the originals, because they're the ones that have been on the planet for hundreds of thousands of years. They've evolved over that time to withstand much more than the genetically modified purpose-built seeds have. And I think your safe bet is there. They might not produce the same amount of yields if you get it right. What I'm saying by that is, if you have brought crops, seeds for dry climates, and you've had the dry climate, then your yields will be up. But if you've brought dry season crops for that period, and you have a wet season, your crops are a total loss. So you need to I think you need to aim for something in between that. Probably not be so greedy, and just stick with what works, until something else comes along. Maybe I always think it's always better to stick with something that our bodies, along with these species of plants that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. At the end of the day, our bodies have also evolved to accept them. I'm unsure whether these genetically modified foods are accepted by our bodies, or even recognised as what they are, because I'm sure that the chemicals that break down these foods in our bodies, I'm sure that the chemicals have been attuned to breaking down something that it's been used to again for many thousands of years, as opposed to now introducing something completely new to the system that it might not even recognise. We've seen some of the experiments that turn out in the laboratories. I'm talking about the rats with all sorts of problems, and we've had scientists come out as well and say that this is not a good idea to be feeding humans this, when obviously the experiments that we're seeing are so dramatic that we shouldn't be even introducing them into the food chain. But we're in a day, guys, where there's massive corruption, and money becomes more important than the right thing to do. It always is the case, isn't it? I've been told it myself many times before. Gene, if you want to earn some money, then stop messing about. Put your conscious in the closet and forget about this, and just go out there and earn some money for yourself. And that seems to be a very common attitude these days. I think it's a terrible attitude. Something not that I would be ever interested in. I'd rather have soup every day, as opposed to a nice big fat T-bone steak, and have to have that on my conscience. So okay, so that in a nutshell, guys, is exactly what's going on in our world. With regards to our jet streams, with regards to the aerosols down in the southern hemisphere. You can see why the jet streams are much wilder down there than they are in the northern hemisphere. Obviously, there's a lot more cosmic radiation attaching with aerosols down there, and therefore building up the cloud as a result of cloud nucleation and cloud seeding. I just wanted to touch on what we're doing with our magnetometer data and when we're going to start actually using that data. So let's have a quick look at that. So as you can see, we've got South California, Kentucky, Perth, Australia, the Gold Coast, Australia, although that one is coming back this week. It should be turned round after it's been put right and then sent back out to Gold Coast. We've also got Hong Kong, and we'll be adding India at some point, and that test data this week. Now, it's going to be at least 3 months, guys, before we can start looking at this data analytically and saying what is going on. We can't start looking at it at the moment because we just simply don't have enough of it, and I don't want to make speculations based on assumptions. I want to make speculations, or I don't want to make speculations at all. I want to make comments on facts that we're looking at. So I want to collect at least 3 months solid data from each of these ones before we start comparing it with the results. Now, Hong Kong, we're due to have another data packet sent any time now. When we do get that, I think we can make a comparison with what we're looking at. We've got a nice long straight graph. I know that magnetometer hasn't been moved recently, so we should have a nice long straight line, and we can compare that over the month, and we can see where it's been going up and down, and we can start making some assumptions as to what we are actually seeing there. Another one is Kentucky. As you can see, a nice long straight line there again on the data. And the only other reason we're starting to get some adjustments with the ones in Gold Coast, Perth is another good example. After it was adjusted, I know that that's been set and screwed now to the wall, so I know that that is not going to be interrupted. So there's another good one that we can look at. And Southern California is another one that will be coming online. So we're going to be comparing them as we get the data. We're due a month's data off all of these pretty much sooner or later that we can compare. And not only that, guys, we've also got the TriMag, which we process the data on every month, and we also look at the magnetosphere data as well from here in the UK. So there's lots going on our observatory, as well as the fact that we cover solar activity, space weather, volcanic activity and earthquake activity. All this data, even on the Schumann frequency and sea ice extent, sea surface temperature, you'll find that all on our website. It's not just this data, because this, in my view, is what is affecting all the world. It's the fact that the Earth's going through a magnetic reversal. It's also the fact that this Earth is experiencing a period of time where the sun's in a low solar output, and has been for quite some time now, 33 years, as you guys know. But we cover a hell of a lot more data as well. Guys, I don't want to take up too much of your time in this video, so I'm going to end it here with just a brief mention of the 2 links that are down there. And more than ever, this observatory needs to be backed up by at least more than the 160 people that we've got now. And I am really grateful for those, each and every one of those people on Patreon and those that make the PayPal donations. I'm really grateful, because without you guys, we just simply would not be here. But if I can encourage a few more people that have probably thought about making a donation, then if I can encourage you to start making some supportive donations to this observatory, because there's no other observatory out there that is doing the exact same thing as what we are. These big organisations aren't giving you the data as regularly as what we are, and we're going to increase the the amount of data that we start putting out once we start getting more data coming in from these positions, global guys. So if we can get a bit more support, we can take this easily to the next level. And we shouldn't even be here right now, because we've been dealing with such a small budget, and yet we've gone global with that budget. Like I said before, I'm sure NASA are scratching their heads. But the only reason we've been able to do this is because I've been able to do as much as I have, like programming, designing the electronics, building the electronics and getting them put out there. We've had a YouTube channel that has had connections all over this world, and we've managed to get these out there. We've done a massive and really marvellous job so far. I just want to continue doing that, guys. I am trying to find an alternative source to raising some cash something separate on the side that doesn't involve organisations, you know, something that can add more to this than what it is that we raise already. But I know it's going to be months away before, you know, I can actually get that started. So, you know, I'm just saying, you know, I'm not just relying on you guys. I am trying to help myself out here, as well as you guys know, I do invest my own time and my own money into these things that we build here as well. So you know, that's where we are. Like I say, if we can just encourage a few more people to make that leap and support us, then that would be great. And I don't think there's anything else to say in this video, guys, other than, you know, I'll keep you informed if there's any changes, and, you know, just stay tuned, because there's always data coming in at one point or another nowadays on this observatory and channel. So there you go, guys, the links are down there, PayPal, and if that's not for you, there's the Patreon. So it's entirely up to you, but the main thing is support it, because it's well worth it. Okay, guys, you have a great week. I'll catch up with you some point in the week, and from there till then, take it easy. As always, bye for now.